The phone call came on a gray November afternoon. I was standing at the kitchen sink peeling potatoes, the rain coming down in that steady Seattle way that doesn't stop for days. The window above the sink was fogged over, the world outside reduced to smudges of color. I'd just dropped the last strip of potato skin into the trash and was reaching for the knife when my phone buzzed against the counter. My hands were wet. It took 2 tries to swipe the screen open. Local area code, a number I didn't recognize. Eleanor Harper? Yes. This is the administrative office of the Seattle Symphony. We held an instrument appraisal event last week, and a cello came through with a serial number matching one in our database, marked as lost property. We wanted to verify the instrument's provenance with you. The potato slid out of my hand and splashed into the sink, sending a spray of water across my apron. Lost property? That cello belongs to my daughter. Ma'am, according to our records, this instrument belongs to the Vivian St. Clair Foundation Collection, catalog number CS0712. It was listed as on loan 3 years ago to a Margaret Bennett. Does that name mean anything to you? Margaret Bennett. My mother. I stood there gripping the phone, the faucet still running, cold water streaming over my hand. The condensation on the window had begun to bead and run, leaving long watery tracks down the glass. Where is the instrument now? I asked. In the possession of a private collector. He brought it in through a broker for evaluation. We matched the serial number immediately and traced the system back to you. Can you confirm the instrument's history for us? Yes. That cello belonged to my great-grandmother. She loaned it to my mother. My mother took it from my daughter last week, saying she was taking it in for maintenance. There was a pause on the other end. We have no maintenance records for that instrument. When we examined it, we found the strings were old and the bridge had been adjusted recently, but there's no documentation of any professional service. What's it worth now? Based on the appraiser's evaluation, current market value is approximately $107,000. $107,000. I turned off the faucet, switched the phone to my other ear, and pulled a kitchen towel off the hook to dry my hands. I'll be in touch. Thank you for letting me know. I hung up and stood there for a long moment, staring at the potatoes floating in the cold water. The rain was hitting the glass in a steady rhythm, a percussive sound like someone pouring dry beans from a height. I didn't cry. Something cold was crystallizing in my chest, so cold that I couldn't feel anything else. That cold was clearer than pain. I looked down at my hands, no trembling, steady breathing, heartbeat slow and even. I picked up the phone again and dialed. Lily's teacher? This is Eleanor. Lily needs to take the week off, family situation. Of course. She's been doing great in class. Let us know if you need anything. I will. Thank you. I went upstairs. Lily was sprawled on her bedroom floor cutting out paper stars, a mess of colored scraps surrounding her. The scissors made a cheerful snip snip snip. She looked up when I came in, gave me a quick smile, and went back to cutting. Mom, Grandma said the cello will be back next week. When did you talk to her? Yesterday. I called her. She said the repairman is busy and needs more time. I sat down on the floor next to her and gently took the scissors from her hand. She looked up, puzzled. Lily, I need to ask you something. I need you to tell me the truth. Okay. When Grandma came to get the cello, what did she tell you? She thought, counting on her fingers. She said she was taking it for maintenance. She said the repairman would give it a bath and put on new strings. She said she'd bring it back next week. She said practice hard so she could hear me play when she got back. Did she say anything else? She hugged me. She said Grandma loves you the most. I looked into my daughter's eyes. She had no idea what that moment meant. She'd handed over that cello with both hands, careful as if she were carrying a full bowl of water. The image of that moment played in my mind frame by frame, the brown case, the faint scratch on the side where she'd bumped it against the door frame last year, the way she'd stood on tiptoes to reach the door handle as she waved goodbye. "Mom," she said, "is the cello coming back?" "Yes," I said. "I promise you." She didn't ask more. She picked up her scissors and went back to her stars. The sound was light and unburdened. I left the room, closed the door, and stood in the hallway. The window at the end of the hall showed a sky the color of old pewter, rain streaking diagonally across the pane. I watched it for a long time. Then I went downstairs, put on my coat, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. Jennings and Associates occupied the 12th floor of an aging office building downtown. The elevator buttons were worn smooth, and the doors opened with a tired groan. A woman with silver hair sat at the reception desk, reading a book as thick as a dictionary. I told her I needed to see Robert Jennings about Vivian St. Clair. She looked up, removed her reading glasses, studied me for a beat, and pointed to the door at the end of the hall. "Go on in. He's there." Jennings was older than I'd expected, older than my father had been. Silver hair, a hawkish nose, gold-rimmed glasses sliding down his nose. He sat behind a desk piled with files, and behind him rose a wall of gray filing cabinets. He listened without interrupting, then took a key from his pocket and walked to the farthest cabinet in the corner. He knelt, opened the bottom drawer, and rifled through it for a moment before pulling out a yellowed manila envelope. He slid 2 sheets of paper across the desk toward me, then sat back and removed his glasses to polish them. "Vivian St. Clair gave this to me personally in 1999. She said if anyone ever touched that cello, I was to give this to her great-granddaughter. That's you." I looked down at the papers. Typewritten, the letters slightly blurred at the edges from an old machine. I read slowly, line by line. First paragraph: I, Vivian St. Clair, do hereby loan cello number CS 0712 to my daughter-in-law Margaret Bennett. Ownership remains with the St. Clair family. The instrument may not be transferred, sold, mortgaged, or used as collateral of any kind. The loan period extends until the death of Margaret Bennett, at which time the instrument shall revert to the direct bloodline of the St. Clair family. Second paragraph: should the borrower violate any of the above terms, I authorize the following law firm to pursue recovery of the instrument itself or equivalent market compensation, and to reserve all legal rights. Third paragraph: this agreement is notarized in Seattle on March 11, 1994. My father died on March 9, 1994. She signed this 2 days after his funeral. Did she know me? I looked up. She knew you, Jennings said. Your father sent her photographs every year. From your first birthday to your high school graduation. Every single one. They were still in an album by her bed when she passed. Did she know what my mother was like? Jennings tucked the papers back into the envelope and slid it toward me. She was your mother's mother-in-law for most of her adult life. She knew. I folded the papers, placed them in my bag, and stood. My knees didn't buckle. My legs held steady. I nodded to the receptionist on my way out. In the elevator, I watched the numbers descend: 12, 11, 10. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it until I reached the parking garage. My mother's message, Eleanor, the cello will be back next Monday. Don't worry. I put the phone away and started the car. That night, Lily asked me to read her a story. I sat on her bed and read Charlotte's Web all the way to the end. She fell asleep before I finished the last paragraph. I sat in the dark for a while, listening to her breathing, watching the strips of streetlight fall across the sheets through the blinds. The next morning I called Jennings. When do you send the letter? Come in today to sign the authorization. I'll send them out this afternoon. One to your mother, one to Grove Instrument House, one to your brother-in-law. Send it to his company. Not his home. Done. The email came at 4 that afternoon. A PDF of the legal letter. The letter demanded immediate return of Cello CS 0712 or equivalent compensation of $107,000, with a 72-hour deadline before civil proceedings commenced. I read it twice, forwarded it to my mother, and typed nothing in the body. Helen called at 7. I didn't pick up. She called again at 8. I didn't answer. At 9 she texted, "Are you insane?" Then, "That cello belongs to Mom. Why are you hiring a lawyer?" I didn't reply. David called at 9:30. I answered. "Eleanor, pull that lawyer back." His voice was low, the television murmuring in the background. "How long have you had the brokerage agreement with Grove Instrument?" "What agreement?" "The one you signed to broker the sale." "You signed it." "Grove signed it." "The agreement says you get 10% commission." The background noise went quiet. He must have moved into another room. I was just helping my mother-in-law. "You asked Grove about the serial number before you took the deal, didn't you?" You did. Grove told you that Cello had a foundation-issued serial number. They told you the registered owner wasn't your mother-in-law. You sat on that information. Silence. "How much did you take?" "Listen, Eleanor." "How much?" 10.7. $10.07? $10,700. You took $10,700 in commission from a cello that belongs to my daughter. Does your boss know you're running private instrument brokerage on the side? He hung up. I sat on the couch in the dark. The rain had stopped, but the clouds were still thick. No stars. I went upstairs to check on Lily. She'd kicked off her covers and was curled into a ball, her mouth slightly open, a small spot of drool on her pillow. I stood in the doorway for a minute, then pulled the door mostly closed. The next morning my mother texted, "Eleanor, let's talk. Just you." She attached an address, a small cafe she used to go to. I replied, "Fine." 2:00. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in the back booth, a half-finished latte in front of her. She stood when she saw me, palms flat on the table, like she wasn't sure whether to sit or stand. "Eleanor." I sat. She followed, hands twisting together on the table. "Let me explain," she said. I didn't think it through. That cello was just sitting in Lily's room. She practices every day. She's a child. She can't even play it properly yet. Whether she can play it properly is not for you to decide. She pressed her lips together, then relaxed them. That cello belongs to the Bennett family. I'm a Bennett. I have a right. You signed an agreement, I cut in, my voice flat. You have usage rights only. March 11, 1994, 2 days after Dad died, Vivian St. Clair had you sign it at a notary. The notary asked you 3 times, "You understand you have usage rights only?" 3 times you said yes. Remember now? Or not? She looked down at her coffee. I know I made a mistake, Eleanor. If you just let the lawyer. Where's the cello? With a collector. Name. Why do you need name? She looked at me. Something in my face must have told her I wasn't going to repeat myself. She said a name, Peter Cohen, Cohen Development. How much did you sell it for? $107,000. Where's the money? What's left? How much did you spend? On the pool, she said, her voice getting smaller. You know Helen's boys are on the swim team, they needed a proper pool. And the rest? I don't. You sold a $107,000 cello. You can't have spent all of it on a pool. Where's the rest? Her mouth opened and closed. You borrowed $5,000 from me on October 5th, I said. You said it was short term. You sold the cello on October 17th. You haven't paid me back. I was going to. You were going to what? You took my money and my daughter's cello and used them to build a pool at my sister's house. And you want me to let it slide? She fell silent. Her hands were clasped in front of her, knuckles white. The coffee had gone cold, a faint lipstick stain on the rim. I'm getting that cello back, I said, standing. The paper you signed is in my lawyer's safe. Get yourself a lawyer. And don't call me again. I walked out. Cold wind hit me in the face as I pushed through the cafe door. I zipped my coat and walked fast to the car. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, gripping it, watching the street through the windshield. Bare trees, wet leaves plastered to the asphalt. I sat there for half a minute, then started the engine and drove. I made 2 calls when I got home. First, Jennings. The buyer's name is Peter Cohen. Cohen Development. Look him up. Second, Tom Fleming, an old college acquaintance. He was an investigative journalist at a local finance magazine. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, but he owed me a favor. I'd connected his wife with a specialist when she needed surgery. Tom, it's Eleanor. Eleanor? It's been a while. How are you? Tell me if this interests you. Go ahead. My mother stole a cello from my 10-year-old daughter and sold it for $107,000 to build a pool for my sister's family. That cello belonged to my great-grandmother. There's a notarized loan agreement from 1994 that explicitly forbids sale. My mother's signature is on it. The broker was my brother-in-law. He took a $10,700 commission. The buyer is a local developer. The Seattle Symphony confirmed the serial number at an appraisal event last week. 5 seconds of silence. When can I see the documents? Now. I sent him everything. The scanned agreement. The Grove Instrument transaction records. David's brokerage contract. Screenshots of my mother's texts. The email ended with, "Don't use my full name. Don't mention my daughter." He replied, "Web version in 3 days." Print follows the next day. Helen showed up at my door the following afternoon. No knock, just pushed it open. I'd forgotten to lock it after Lily came home. She stood in the entryway, unzipped puffy coat, hair loose, face red from the cold. She was holding her phone. "Eleanor, did you call David's office?" "I didn't call. I sent a legal notice. It went to his office. His boss called him in for a half-hour meeting this morning. You know what he said? He said David's personal conduct is damaging the company's reputation. They suspended him." She was loud, then lowered her voice and glanced toward the stairs. "Eleanor, He has 2 kids, that job. He took a $10,700 commission, I said. Did you know? That's David's business, I didn't. You were sitting next to him. That night your mother called to say the cello sold for $107,000, you said, great, now we can build that pool. You used the word we. You knew that night. She opened her mouth and closed it. Did you spend any of that money? Yes. On what? Swim team fees for the boys. Her voice got smaller. And paid off some credit cards. You borrowed $3,000 from me last year, I said. $5,000 the year before. You never paid either back. I never asked. You thought that was just what sisters do. And then you took my daughter's cello to buy your kids a pool. Her eyes were reddening. She stood there in her puffy coat, gray sweater underneath with a coffee stain at the collar. Leave, I said. Next time, knock. I keep the door unlocked so my daughter can get in and out. Not for you to storm in and interrogate me. She left. I stood for a minute looking at the door, at a small dent I'd never noticed. I touched it with my fingers, then went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. The article hit on the 3rd morning. Tom sent a link at 7 a.m. The headline read, A Cello's Journey, From Family Heirloom to a Swimming Pool, $107,000. I read the whole thing sitting on the kitchen counter with my coffee. 3,000 words, 4 interviews. The first section cited anonymous sources on the loan agreement. The second detailed the transaction. The third broke down the commission. The fourth quoted an unnamed attorney. That loan agreement is still legally binding. The defaulting party faces asset recovery and potential civil damages. 200 comments in the first 2 hours. That grandmother is a monster. The broker's just as guilty. I hope the victim gets her cello back. One comment rose to the top, a single line. Vivian St. Clair saw this coming in 1999 and made sure everything was in place. I didn't know who wrote it, but it made me stop. Jennings called at 10. Cohen's lawyer contacted me. He's willing to return the instrument. Conditions, full refund plus $3,000 for shipping and handling. The foundation account will cover it. What do you say? Take it. One more thing, the civil suit against David. Do we proceed? Proceed. Your mother. I'll drop her suit on one condition. She signs a written admission of breach, agreeing never to touch the cello or Lily again. That cuts her off legally. You sure? Yes. 3 days for her signature. I hung up and stood in the living room. Lily was upstairs practicing scales. The sound came through the ceiling, steady, stronger than it had been last week. I climbed the stairs and stood in her doorway. She was playing with her back to me, the cello nestled between her knees, bow arm loose and relaxed, a line from shoulder to wrist like a river finding its course. She finished a phrase, turned, saw me, and smiled. Did you hear that? I did. Better than last week. My teacher said I need to relax my hand more. Try it. She nodded, put the cello back in its case, and smoothed the cat sticker on the lid. The corner was peeling. She pressed it down with her thumb. Then she bounded over. Mom, can we get ice cream? You practiced 10 minutes and you want ice cream? 20 minutes. Fine. 20 minutes. Let's go. The afternoon was the same shade of gray as every other afternoon that month. Lily ate her strawberry cone and got cream on her nose. I had coffee. We sat by the window, watching a yellow Labrador stop and sniff every planter on the street. 3 days later my mother came. She knocked this time. I opened the door. She was wearing a gray coat, her hair whiter than before, neatly combed. She held out a manila envelope. Her fingers pressed the edge before she let it go. I signed. I opened it. The document was exactly what Jennings had prepared. On the second page, my mother's signature. Attached, a handwritten note, slightly shaky but legible. I, Margaret Bennett, acknowledge my breach and agree not to approach Cello CS 0712 or its holder Liliana Harper. I read it twice and placed it in my bag. Eleanor, she hadn't moved. Mom. Can I see Lily again? The agreement covers the cello. Not you seeing her. But if you do see her, you answer her questions yourself, about the cello, about everything. She stood there with her hands at her sides, one lifting to touch her collar. The gray coat was old, a thread loose at the cuff. Eleanor, about the money. I don't want it. She looked up. But I won't lend you money again, I said. Ever. She opened her mouth, closed it, and turned away. She walked down the sidewalk, long shadow trailing behind her in the dim November light. She didn't look back. I closed the door and locked the envelope in the safe. The cello arrived the following morning. I drove to Jennings's office. It lay on the conference table in its brown case. I opened it and checked every inch. The strings were intact, the bridge straight, the cat sticker still on the neck. There was a new scratch, shallow, about an inch long. I closed the case, carried it to the car, and drove home. Lily's reaction was worth every sleepless night I'd had for the past 2 weeks. When I picked her up from school, she saw the case in the back seat and froze for 1 second before screaming. She dove into the back, wrapped her arms around the case, her face pressed into the velvet lining. She didn't let go the whole way home. Mommy, it's back. It's back. Did Grandma bring it? Not Grandma. Someone who knew you before you were born helped get it back. Who? Your great-great-grandmother. But she died. She did. But she made sure the path was ready. All you have to do is walk it. That night she practiced for 2 hours. I sat in the living room with a cup of tea and listened. The rain stopped sometime around 8. A thin wedge of moonlight appeared between the clouds and spread across the floor. The trial for David's case was set for January. I sat in the back row of the courtroom, 4 or 5 empty chairs between me and anyone else. David sat at the defendant's table in a new gray suit, the sleeves a little too long. His lawyer spent 2 hours arguing that his client didn't know the cello couldn't be sold. The prosecutor countered with one line, then why did he delete the note on the contract that said, confirm ownership? The courtroom went quiet. David's hands were clasped on the table, knuckles white. The verdict came in late January. David Cross was ordered to pay $25,000 in damages, $10,700 in restitution, the rest punitive. 12 monthly installments, automatically deducted from his wages. He didn't appeal. My mother paid back $2,000 in February. A note, handwritten, I'll send more when I can. Don't tell Lily. I put the note in my desk drawer with the rest of the papers. Another $2,000 arrived in March. Then nothing. I didn't ask. Spring came early. The cherry tree in the backyard bloomed in March, tiny white-pink buds dotting every branch. Lily counted them every day after school. She'd lose count and start over. In April, she played in a community music festival. I sat in the audience next to an elderly woman with white hair. Lily performed a full Bach cello suite from memory. When she finished, The room was silent for 3 full seconds before the applause came. I clapped until my palms were sore. The old woman next to me touched my arm as she got up to leave. "Your daughter has the St. Clair light in her hands." I never found out who she was. Years passed like that. Not dramatically. One day at a time. Lily grew taller, lost teeth, grew them back. She switched to a full-size cello, but she kept the old one in her room. She'd touch it sometimes on her way by. She said the old one had a sound the new one couldn't match, deeper, older, like it had something to say. One afternoon I found her in the study, sitting on the floor with the old cello case open in front of her. The surface was covered in stickers now: the cat, a gold star, a red ladybug, a lopsided blue flower. She'd written something on the case in blue pen: "My family's cello. Never for sale." The words were slightly shaky, pressed deep into the surface. In the fall of that year, my mother died. Helen called. I answered, even though I'd deleted the contact. She told me in a small, tired voice. The funeral was small. I wore a dark coat and sat in the back. Helen gave a eulogy. She said our mother had worked hard her whole life. She said she went peacefully. I didn't speak. After the service, Helen caught me at the door. She said something the day before, Helen said, voice low. She said to send Lily the scarf. Winter's coming. I looked at her. Was she lucid? Yes. She ate a full bowl of porridge that morning. I didn't ask more. I nodded, turned, and walked to the car. That winter, Lily wore the gray scarf my mother had knitted. She never asked where it came from. She just put it on when the weather turned cold. It was shorter than the first one, the stitches a little tighter, but it was warm. Lily got into college on a music scholarship. She took both cellos with her, the new one for practice rooms, the old one for her dorm. She said she couldn't leave it alone. She came home once a month, and every time she put the old cello back in the study corner, facing the silver-framed photograph of Vivian St. Clair. She'd stand there for a moment, quiet, then heft the case onto her shoulder and say, "I'll see you next month." One evening she came home from school with a piece of paper. A reproduction of a 1937 concert poster from New York City Hall. Vivian St. Clair, in her dark high-collared dress, one hand resting on a cello neck. Lily framed it and placed it next to the case. She should see it, Lily said. They should keep each other company. She practiced that afternoon with the study door open. The music was fast, dense, a running rhythm that filled the house and drifted out into the yard. I sat on the sofa in the living room with my hands in my lap and listened to the whole piece. When she finished, she came running out, bow in hand, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. Did you hear the tempo change? Did it hold together? It held together. She grinned and went back inside to run it 10 more times. As she turned, the tip of her bow grazed the hallway wall and left a light gray mark. I didn't wipe it off. It's still there, thin as a strand of hair, a line that runs from the doorframe halfway to the corner. A trace. A reminder. A string of music that never quite fades. That mark stayed on the wall for the rest of the winter. I noticed it every time I walked down the hallway, a thin gray line that caught the light at certain angles, especially in the late afternoon when the sun came through the window at a low slant. I could have painted over it. I could have scrubbed it off with a damp cloth. I never did. It wasn't damage. It was a signature. Lily left for her first year of college in the fall. I helped her pack the car, 2 suitcases, a box of books, the full-size cello in its hard case, and the old St. Clair cello in its battered brown case with the stickers. She'd insisted on bringing both. I told her it was going to be cramped in the dorm room. She said she'd make it work. "I'll put the old one under the bed," she said. "It won't take up space. It'll just be there." "Under the bed?" "Yeah. So I know it's safe." I didn't argue. I lifted the brown case into the back seat and wedged it between the box of books and the full-sized case. Lily stood at the front door with her backpack on, looking at the house one last time. I saw her eyes move from the front window to the cherry tree to the porch steps. She took a breath, then turned around and got in the car. The drive to the university was 3 hours east, through the Cascades. October had turned the mountains gold and red. She was quiet for most of the drive, her forehead against the passenger window, watching the trees blur past. I put on a playlist she used to like when she was 12. She didn't tell me to change it. We pulled up to the dorm at 4 in the afternoon. A cluster of parents and students filled the courtyard, hauling duffel bags and mini fridges. I helped Lily carry her things up 2 flights of stairs. Her room was small, 2 beds, 2 desks, a closet, a window that faced the parking lot. Her roommate hadn't arrived yet. Lily dropped her duffel on the left bed and stood in the middle of the room, turning in a slow circle. "It's small," she said. "It's temporary." She shrugged. "I like it. It's mine." We put the big cello case against the wall by the desk. Then she knelt down and slid the brown case under her bed. It fit perfectly, like it had always been meant to live there. She sat on the floor and ran her hand over the top of the case, tracing the outline of a peeling cat sticker with her fingertip. "Don't forget it's there," I said. "I won't." I stayed until 6, helping her arrange her desk and hang a few things on the wall. She put up the 1937 poster of Vivian St. above the bed. She'd brought it with her. She used blue painter's tape to stick the corners, standing back to make sure it was straight. Then she stepped back and nodded, satisfied. I hugged her goodbye at the car. She was taller than me now. The top of her head came up to my chin. She wrapped her arms around me and held on a little longer than usual. "Call me when you get home," she said. "So I know you made it." "Drive safely," she added, like she was the parent. I got in the car and watched her in the rearview mirror as I pulled out. She was still standing there, hands in her jacket pockets, a red sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked small against the big brick dormitory behind her. But she also looked steady. Stable. Like she knew where she was going. I drove home through the dark. The mountains had disappeared into the night, and the road was just a stretch of headlights and guardrails. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I felt something else, something I didn't have a name for. A combination of pride and release and a low hum of trust that everything would be fine. The house was too quiet when I got back. I walked through the living room, the kitchen, up the stairs. The door to Lily's room was open. The bed was made. The bookshelf was half empty. The old cello case wasn't in the corner. I stood in the doorway for a minute, listening to the silence. Then I went downstairs, made myself a cup of tea, and sat on the couch. The TV was off. The house was dark except for the kitchen light and the reading lamp beside the sofa. I sat there for a long time. The tea went cold in my hands. I stared at the wall above the TV, at the blank space where her school photos used to hang. I'd taken them down last week and packed them in a box. I thought about Vivian St. I thought about her standing on a stage in New York in 1937, her hand resting on a cello neck, her face calm and untroubled. She'd played that night for a room full of strangers. She'd played for people who would never know her name, who'd forget her face by the next morning. She'd played anyway. I thought about Margaret Bennett, my mother. She was buried now in a cemetery on the east side of the city. I hadn't been back since the funeral. I didn't plan to go. But I found myself wondering what she would have thought if she'd seen Lily walk into that dorm room with the old cello case under her arm. Would she have recognized it? Would she have remembered the weight of it, the way the handle curved against her palm? Or would it have been just another piece of furniture to her, something to move, to store, to sell? I didn't know. I would never know. And I had made peace with that. The next month, Lily called every Sunday. She told me about her classes, her roommate, the cafeteria food, the orchestra rehearsals. She said she'd joined the university chamber ensemble and they were playing Dvorak in the spring. She said the conductor had heard her play the old cello and asked about its provenance. She told him the whole story: great-grandmother, loan agreement, sale, recovery. He'd told her it was one of the best stories he'd heard in 20 years of teaching. She said she was practicing 4 hours a day. She said the old cello was still under her bed, but she took it out once a week to play a few bars. Just to keep the strings loose. Just to remind herself it was there. "Mom," she said one night, her voice tinny through the phone, "I think about Vivian sometimes." "What do you think about?" "I think about her standing on that stage in 1937. She didn't know I was going to exist. She didn't know anyone like me was coming. But she kept the cello anyway. She kept it for someone who wasn't born yet. She did. I want to be like that," she said. "I want to leave something for someone I'll never meet. Something that stays." I didn't know what to say. I held the phone a little tighter and looked out the window at the cherry tree, bare against the November sky. "You already are," I said. "You already have." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Thanks, Mom." We hung up. I turned off the lights and went to bed. Winter came. Christmas break, Lily came home for 10 days. She brought both cellos with her. She practiced in the study with the poster of Vivian St. Clair on the wall. She was playing harder pieces now, something by Shostakovich, something by Elgar. Her hands were faster, her bowing smoother. She didn't make the mistakes she used to. She just played. On New Year's Eve, we sat on the couch and watched the ball drop on TV. She was curled up in a blanket, her feet tucked under her. The old cello was in its case next to the couch, like a sleeping animal. "Mom," she said, during a commercial break, "do you ever regret how things went with Grandma?" I thought about it. I thought about the phone calls, the cafe, the letter she'd signed on my doorstep. I thought about the gray scarf that still hung in Lily's closet. I thought about the last time I'd seen her, walking away down the sidewalk, her shadow stretched long behind her. "No," I said. "I don't. Not even a little? Not even a little." She made her choices. I made mine. I don't have to carry hers. Lily nodded. She didn't ask more. She turned back to the TV and watched the crowd count down to midnight. When the numbers hit 0, she leaned over and hugged me. "Happy New Year, Mom." "Happy New Year, Lily." She went upstairs to sleep. I stayed on the couch for a while, watching the rerun of the festivities play out on the screen. The cherry tree outside was covered in frost. The neighbors' Christmas lights were still blinking, red and green and gold, steady and repetitive. The house was warm and quiet and full of good things. Spring came again. The cherry tree bloomed, white-pink, the same as every year. Lily came home for spring break with her dorm friends. One of them was a tall boy with a shy smile who played the piano. He heard her play the old cello and said it sounded like a voice you could trust. She blushed. I pretended not to notice. She left the old cello at home that time. She said she wanted to keep it safe while she was traveling with her friends. She put it in the study, next to the poster of Vivian St. Clair. I told her I'd look after it. She said she knew I would. That summer, the university orchestra performed a concert in the city. Lily was the principal cellist. She played the Elgar Concerto. I sat in the third row, alone. The seats around me were filled with parents and grandparents and siblings. Lily's seat was empty in my row. There was no one else I needed to bring. She walked on stage in a simple black dress. Her hair was longer now, pulled back with a silver clip. She took her seat, adjusted the cello, and looked out at the audience. Her eyes scanned the rows and found me. She smiled. A small smile, just for a second. Then she looked down at her hands and began. I had heard her practice that piece 100 times. I had heard her stumble through it. I had heard her get frustrated and start over, again and again. But sitting in that hall, listening to her play it all the way through, without hesitation, without doubt, I understood something I hadn't understood before. She wasn't playing the cello. She was speaking through it. It was her voice. The notes were her words. She was telling a story that couldn't be told any other way. When she finished, the audience was silent. Not the uncomfortable kind. The full kind. The kind where people are holding their breath. Then the applause started. I clapped until my palms stung. She stood and bowed. She looked at me again and smiled. I didn't cry that time either. I was too full. Afterward, I waited for her in the lobby. The tall boy with the shy smile was there, holding her sheet music. She ran up to me with her arms open. We hugged for a long time. Mom, did you hear the second movement? Did you hear the... I heard everything. You were incredible. I didn't mess up the coda. You didn't mess up anything. She laughed and rested her head on my shoulder. I could smell her shampoo, the same one she'd used since high school. Something lavender. Let's go get dinner, I said. My treat. Really? Yes. You earned it. We walked out of the concert hall into the warm June evening. The sun was still up, a low golden light falling across the city streets. Lily was wearing a thin cardigan over her dress, carrying her sheet music in a canvas bag. She kept the bag slung over one shoulder and leaned against me as we walked. You know what I was thinking about during the second movement, she said. Tell me. I was thinking about Vivian St. Clair. I was thinking about her playing that cello in 1937, in a hall like this. I was thinking about how she probably felt scared, right before she walked out on stage. And then she walked out anyway. Were you scared? A little. But then I thought about the cello and I stopped being scared. We reached the restaurant. A small Italian place with red checkered tablecloths and dim lighting. Lily ordered pasta. I ordered wine. We ate, we talked, we laughed. She told me about the shy piano player and laughed when I asked if he was her boyfriend. She said no. She said maybe. She said she didn't know. After dinner, we walked back to the car. The sky had gone dark now, but the streets were still warm from the day's heat. Lily stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and looked up at the stars. Mom, she said, when I'm a famous cellist, I'm going to buy you a house with a bigger kitchen. You don't have to buy me a house. My kitchen is fine. Not bigger for you. Bigger for me. So I have more room to cook. Anything you want. She grinned and got in the car. I drove her back to the dorms. She kissed my cheek and told me she loved me. Then she walked away into the dormitory, her canvas bag swinging at her side. I drove home. The road was empty. The sky was clear. I thought about Vivian St. Clair again. I thought about her walking off that stage in 1937, into a world she couldn't predict. She didn't know me. She didn't know Lily. But she'd left something behind. She'd left the cello. She'd left the loan agreement. She'd left the instructions. I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the house. The porch light was on. I'd left it on before I left. The cherry tree was a dark silhouette against the night. Everything was still. Everything was where it was supposed to be. I got out, locked the car, and walked inside. I went to the study and looked at the old cello case, leaning against the wall next to the poster. It was quiet. It didn't need to make a sound. It just needed to be there. Waiting for the next time it would be lifted, opened, played. I went to bed. I fell asleep easily, deeply. Lily graduated college 4 years later. I sat in the same seat in the same auditorium, 3rd row from the front. She walked across the stage with the shy piano player who was no longer shy, who had turned into a steady young man with a kind face and a firm handshake. They held hands as they crossed the stage. The audience applauded. I applauded louder than anyone. She invited me to her graduation dinner. Her friends came. Her music professors came. The shy piano player's parents came. We sat at a long table and ate things I couldn't pronounce. Lily made a toast. She thanked her teachers, her friends, her mother. She didn't mention Vivian St. Clair. But she didn't need to. The cello had been in her apartment for 2 years now. She played it every week. After dinner, she pulled me aside. She was wearing a dark green dress that made her eyes look like they'd caught the afternoon light. "Mom," she said, "I'm going to give you something." She handed me a small box. I opened it. Inside was a key. Not a house key. A small, tarnished silver key, old and delicate, like it belonged to a jewelry box or a diary. "What is this?" "It's the key to the cello case." "I thought you had that." "I did. But I want you to keep it. I want you to know that every time you look at it, you remember that thing you gave me, the thing that didn't cost money. The thing you didn't sell." I looked at her. Her eyes were bright. Not watery. Just bright. "Lily. You told me Vivian St. Clair left something behind for someone she'd never meet. You did the same. You went to that lawyer. You found that paper. You fought for that cello. That's what I'm going to remember. Not the people who took it. The person who brought it back." I closed my hand around the key. It was warm from her palm. Small and light and made of something old that would not break. "I'll keep it," I said. "Good." We walked back to the table. The party went on around us. Someone was telling a story about a recital that went wrong. Someone else was laughing too loud. Lily leaned against the shy piano player and rested her head on his shoulder. I sat with my fingers closed around that silver key and watched my daughter. Later that night, I drove home. The key was in my pocket. I touched it every few minutes, feeling the ridges of the teeth, the smooth curve of the bow. It was so small. It held so much. The house was quiet when I got in. I walked to the study. The cello wasn't there anymore. It was in Lily's apartment, 100 miles away. But the key was in my pocket. And the poster was still on the wall. Vivian St. Clair was still there, looking out from the faded paper. I went to the kitchen and made tea. I sat on the couch, the same spot I'd sat in a dozen years ago, when I'd held that phone call in my hand and listened to a stranger tell me that my daughter's cello was gone. A lot had happened since then. A lot had been taken. A lot had been returned. Some things had been left behind. I sipped my tea. The house was warm. The night was still. Somewhere 100 miles away, my daughter was sleeping, with a cello case at the foot of her bed. And somewhere else, in a different time, a woman I'd never met was waiting for me to find a key I didn't know existed. I smiled, just a little. The tea was good. I got up, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed. I didn't dream that night. I didn't need to. The story was already written, and it was the right one. The morning after Lily's graduation, I woke up to sunlight cutting across the bedroom floor. I lay there for a minute, blinking at the ceiling, trying to remember what day it was. Then I remembered. Lily was grown. She'd walked across a stage in a dark green dress, accepted her diploma, and smiled at me from 30 feet away. And I had a key in my pocket. I got up and made coffee. The house was quiet, the way it always was now. But the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a room that had been cleaned out and was ready for something new. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and pulled the silver key out of my pocket. It was small, old, tarnished at the edges. The key to the cello case. Lily had given it to me. She said she wanted me to remember what I'd done for her. But I already knew what I'd done. I'd done what any mother would do. I'd found the paper, I'd called the lawyer, I'd fought for the thing that mattered. I turned the key over in my hand. There was a tiny engraving on the bow, the initials VSC. Vivian St. Clair. She'd had this key made sometime in the 1930s, when she was young and famous and full of music. She'd used it to open that brown case 1,000 times. She'd closed it after every concert, every practice, every long night in a hotel room with a borrowed piano and a room service tray. She'd kept that key close to her, probably in a pocket or a small pouch. And now it was in my hand, in my kitchen, on a Tuesday morning in June. I put the key in the small wooden box on my dresser, next to the silver-framed photograph of Vivian St. Clair. I closed the lid and left it there. That week, I started cleaning out the attic. It had been on my list for years, the boxes of old clothes, the Christmas decorations that hadn't been touched since Lily was a child, the stacks of faded books and forgotten paperwork. I'd been putting it off for too long. Now seemed like the right time. I spent 3 days up there, sorting through things. I found Lily's baby blanket. I found my father's old pipe. I found a box of letters my mother had written to me when I was in college. She'd kept copies, for some reason. I almost threw them away without reading them. But I sat down on the dusty floor and opened the first one. Dear Eleanor, it began. I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. Things have been hard here, with your father's health. But I want you to know I'm thinking of you. I hope you're doing well in school. Remember to eat regular meals. Your mother. I read several more. They were all like that, polite, distant, careful. She never said she loved me. She never said she was proud of me. She just checked in, like a nurse taking a temperature. I put the letters back in the box and set it aside. I didn't throw them away. I didn't keep them, exactly. I just left them there, in the attic, where they'd been for the past 20 years. On the third day, I found a box at the back of the attic, pushed into a corner behind a stack of old suitcases. It was smaller than the others, about the size of a shoe box, and it was covered in a thick layer of dust. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside, there was a collection of photographs. Black and white, mostly. I recognized some of the faces: my father as a young man, my grandmother on her wedding day, a group of people I didn't know standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. And at the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, there was a photograph of Vivian St. Clair. It wasn't the same as the one in the silver frame. In this one, she was older. Her hair was gray, her face lined with age. She was sitting in a chair in what looked like a living room, a cup of tea in her hands. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't frowning either. She looked peaceful. She looked like a woman who had done what she needed to do and was ready to rest. On the back of the photograph, in blue ink, someone had written, "Vivian, 1988, last year she played." I held the photograph for a long time. 1988, she'd been 78 years old that year. She'd still been playing. She'd still been alive when I was a child, when I was running through the yard and going to school and not thinking about cellos or great-grandmothers or stolen instruments. I put the photograph on top of the box, next to the silver-framed one in my bedroom. It felt right to have her there, in my house, in my life. The woman who'd planned ahead. The woman who'd known my mother well enough to predict what she might do. The woman who'd left the door open and the key in the lock. That summer, Lily called me every few days. She was spending the summer in the city with her friends, working a part-time job, playing in a community orchestra. She was happy. I could hear it in her voice. She was light and full of energy, and she told me about new pieces she was learning, about the piano player who was no longer just a friend, about how much she missed home but how much she loved her new life. I told him about the cello, she said one night. The whole story. He just sat there and listened for like an hour. He didn't interrupt once. Did he say anything after? He said I should write it down. He said it's the kind of story people need to hear. He said not everyone gets to have that, a story where the person who loses something gets it back. He's a good one, I said. He is, she said. I think I'll keep him. I laughed. You do that. August came. I was in the garden, pulling weeds from the flower bed, when I saw a car pull up in front of the house. It was a silver sedan I didn't recognize. A woman got out. She was older, maybe in her late 50s, with short gray hair and a kind face. She walked up the path to the front door. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my knees, and met her on the porch. Can I help you? Are you Eleanor Harper? I am. I'm Judith Miller. I was a friend of Margaret Bennett's. My mother. I hadn't heard anyone say her name in months. We met years ago, through a book club, Judith said. Margaret and I stayed in touch. She spoke about you often, and about your daughter. I didn't know what to say. The porch was warm in the afternoon sun. A breeze moved through the cherry tree. I stood there, waiting. I don't want to intrude, Judith said. I came because Margaret asked me to. Before she passed, she gave me something to give to you. She said I should wait until the time was right. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Plain, white, unsealed. She handed it to me. Thank you, I said. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea? She smiled. Thank you. I'll take a cup of tea. I made tea. We sat in the living room, on the couch. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. Judith held her cup with both hands, like she was warming them, even though it was August. I don't want you to think I'm here to pressure you, she said. I'm just the messenger. Whatever you do with what's in that envelope is up to you. I nodded and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten, in a script I recognized as my mother's. Neater than her usual, more careful, as if she'd taken her time with each letter. Dear Eleanor, it said. I'm writing this because I know I won't be able to say it to you in person. I was wrong. I was wrong about the cello. I was wrong about what I did. You were right, all those years ago, when you said I had no right to sell it. I knew it then, but I was too stubborn to admit it. That's the one thing I can't take back, the stubbornness that made me hurt you and Lily. I hope you can forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours. I know you don't need my permission to move on. But I want you to know I'm proud of you. I didn't say it often enough. I didn't say it at all. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of Lily. I'm proud of what you built together. The money I sent back, the $2,000, the other $2,000, it wasn't enough. I know that. But I wanted you to know I tried. I wanted you to know I was thinking about you. Take care of that cello. It always belonged where it ended up. Love, Mom. I read the letter twice. The handwriting was slightly unsteady at the bottom, as if her hand had grown tired. The word love was written smaller than the rest, pressed into the paper like she'd had to make a deliberate choice to put it there. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Thank you, I said to Judith. Thank you for bringing this. She loved you, Judith said. She didn't know how to show it, but she did. I didn't argue. I didn't agree. I just nodded. Judith finished her tea and stood to leave. I walked her to the door. We shook hands on the porch, and she walked back to her car. I watched her pull away, the silver sedan disappearing around the corner. I went back inside and sat on the couch. The letter was in my hand. I opened it again and read the last line, it always belonged where it ended up. It always belonged where it ended up. I read that sentence a few more times. Then I put the letter in the wooden box on my dresser, next to the key and the silver-framed photograph. I went to the study and looked at the poster of Vivian St. Clair. She was still there, looking out from the faded paper, her hand resting on the cello neck. I looked at her for a long time. The next day, I called Lily. Your grandmother sent me a letter, I said. Before she died. A friend of hers just brought it over. What did it say? It said she was sorry. It said she was proud of me. It said that cello always belonged where it ended up. Lily was quiet for a moment. Where did it end up? She asked. With you, I said. It ended up with you. She laughed. It was a soft, warm sound. That's a nice letter, Mom. It is. Are you okay? Reading it. I'm fine, I said. I'm better than fine. Good. I'm glad she wrote it. Me too. We hung up. I sat in the kitchen, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun on my shoulders. The house was quiet. Not empty. Just quiet. That fall, Lily called to tell me she was going to graduate school. She'd been accepted to a music program in New York. She was going to study performance. She was taking the old cello with her. I'll be right there, she said. I'll be living in the same city she played in. Vivian St. Clair. I'll be walking the same streets. The same streets, 80 years later. 80 years later, she repeated. I wonder if she ever thought about that. I wonder if she ever thought about someone coming after her. She did, I said. She set up the loan agreement. She left the key. She knew someone was coming. Then I want to be that person, Lily said. I want to be the one who came after her. You already are. She laughed again. I could hear the smile in her voice, even through the phone. The leaves on the cherry tree turned and fell. Winter came, cold and wet and gray. The Christmas lights went up on the houses, and the street was strung with color. Lily came home for the holidays, and we sat together on the couch, watching old movies and drinking hot cocoa. The old cello case was in the study, waiting for her to take it back to New York. She went in there every afternoon and played for an hour. The music filled the house, warm and steady, like it always had. One afternoon, she called me into the study. She was standing in front of the poster of Vivian St. Clair, holding the cello. Mom, she said, I'm going to play something. She sat down and began to play. It was a piece I didn't recognize, slow, longing, full of long notes that seemed to float in the air before fading. It wasn't sad. It wasn't happy. It was something in between, something that didn't need a name. When she finished, she looked up at me. That's for her, she said. Her. Vivian. I've been working on this piece all semester. I wanted to play it for her before I left. Where did you find it? I found it in an old collection in the library. It was written by a composer she knew. There was a note in the margin, for VSC, 1937. I think he wrote it for her. So I learned it. So I could bring it back. I stood in the doorway and looked at her. She was sitting in the chair where she'd practiced for years, the cello between her knees, her hands resting on the strings. The poster was on the wall behind her. Two women, one in a photograph, one in the flesh, separated by time but connected by the same piece of music. It's a good piece, I said. It's a great piece, she said. And I'm going to play it in New York. I believe her. The next day, Lily packed her bags and put the old cello in the car. I drove her to the airport. We hugged goodbye at the terminal. She walked through the security line, looking back twice. The second time, she lifted her hand in a wave, and I waved back. Then she was gone. I drove home through the rain. The city was gray and busy, the roads slick with water. I took my time, driving carefully, not in a hurry. There was nothing waiting for me that couldn't wait. I pulled into the driveway and sat for a while, just looking at the house. The cherry tree was bare, its branches black against the winter sky. The porch light was on. I'd left it on before I left. I went inside, made a cup of tea, and sat on the couch. I looked around the room, the bookshelves, the photos, the old furniture that had been in the family for years. Everything was still. Everything was where it was supposed to be. I thought about my mother's letter. It always belonged where it ended up. She'd said that about the cello. But maybe it was true about other things too. Maybe we all end up where we're supposed to be, even if it takes a long time to get there. I picked up my phone and sent Lily a text. I'm glad you have that cello. She replied a minute later. I'm glad you gave it to me. I smiled and put the phone down. The tea was warm in my hands. The rain continued to fall against the window. It was a sound I'd known my whole life. And I sat there, in the quiet of my home, and I let myself feel all of it. The sadness and the joy and the long, steady current of time that carried everything forward. The cello was in New York now. My daughter was in New York. The woman who'd first played that instrument was long gone. But the music stayed. The music always stayed. That was the thing that didn't get stolen. The thing that couldn't be taken away.